battle mode, you know, it's like, and we were in New York.
I will call the meeting to order. Could we rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Claire, are you taking the roll this evening?
Yeah,
Oh, Judy's
that's
taking the
my
roll.
job.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Is this changing since I was gone last month?
Yeah, it is, I guess. Okay, Mr. Henschel.
Here.
Mr. Syke.
Here.
Ms. Walters.
Present.
Tubbs.
Here.
Gonzalez.
Here.
Leonard. Absent and excused. And Nemitz here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. The first item on the agenda then is to review for any conflict of interest. Is there any conflict of interest that anyone needs to report with respect to this evening's agenda?
Just don't know what to do with regards to the minutes that I'm conflicted out of. I just don't vote on it, correct?
So I guess my thought would be that if you were not in attendance at the meeting, it would be difficult to make a determination as to the accuracy of the minutes. So,
So I'm just not going to vote on number
Okay.
item 4.
okay. Anything else?
Yeah, on page.
Oh, we're just doing conflict of interest.
Oh, okay, no.
No, okay,
None.
okay.
Okay.
So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Can I have a correction?
If you, on the agenda?
Yes.
Yes?
No, not on the agenda. I'm sorry, I'm the wrong thing. I'm talking about.
About the minutes. We're the next one down. That's okay. That's okay. You've got more responsibility now,
Yeah,
so
I
it's
know.
difficult. So,
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
thank you. You second? It's been moved by Commissioner Syke with support by Commissioner Henschel to approve this evening's agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The agenda is approved. Now we next need to approve the minutes of our special meeting of June 29th, 2021. We'll start with that one. Are there any revisions or corrections that we need to make to those minutes?
I have a question or what we can add. Let's talk about page 2 first, where we begin with Counselor Joe Quant, which says Joe Quant. It says the setbacks will be removed within 90 days. Do you think it's 90 days from that meeting or 90 days from a predetermined date? I think, I don't know if we need a date in there for clarification so that we can note that and keep track.
You know, I did talk with our attorney about this. It wasn't one of the conditions that the Planning Commission adopted, but it was a statement that was made by the attorney. So I think keeping it at the 90 days, my interpretation would be from the date of this meeting, keeping that in the minutes.
So should it say will be removed within 90 days from June 29? Or do we just say, because it's,
I don't
is
think
it
we-
just assumed? I mean, can
I
we,
mean, it wasn't clarified at the meeting.
No.
So.
Yeah, but I would interpret it the same way you did, but I don't know if you added into the minutes that so it's not specifically stated that way.
It's not really binding because we didn't make that as a condition. We did not place that time requirement. So it's really a statement that he made, but there's nothing that they have to follow that because we didn't require them to do that.
Well, I think, but am I not correct that they are within the setback and they will, since it's not been approved, they will have to be removed? The issue is the timeliness, and I presume that your office would not take any action on removing it until at least 90 days from the meeting. And if it's not removed by that time, then thereafter you take action.
Right, and we're working with them. to
Right.
make sure that that site plan is approved and the conditions are met, and that needs to happen in a timely manner.
right. I just didn't know that if we needed, but since it wasn't a condition, I understand what
Yeah.
John is saying too.
Yeah, well, I think it wasn't a condition, but it also is now a violation. And I suppose we could say we're not going to give you the 90 days, although I think we would also, since they indicated they'd remove it in 90 days,
Yeah,
that we'd give them
yeah.
the 90 days to do so.
Okay, so it's assumed. All right. And then on page 3 of 22, it said if we look at the meeting reconvened, the third paragraph down at 8:12, it says conditions 1 through 10, and I'm only counting 9 conditions.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I'm missing, where are you at now?
Okay,
I see what
third
you're saying.
paragraph. And-
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So did we, was it the 90 days we missed?
So I do understand what you're saying here, is that it indicates conditions 1 through 10, and yet when we look at attachment A, there's 9 conditions. So do we miss one that was not on attachment A, or should that have said 1 through 9 as amended?
Well, were those changed at all? Because that was the reason we took the break,
I
was
think
to
there were
them.
only 6 originally, if
Okay.
we went back to the
That's true.
original
All right.
Yeah.
recommendations from Claire. There were 6, and then we added, so I don't, but I only see 9 on here. So,
The attachment A that you're seeing is
Mhm.
what was reviewed at the planning commission meeting, so that this hasn't
Okay.
been changed since.
So it should have said, so the minutes should say conditions 1 through 9 as amended.
okay. That's
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, looks like then we've made one revision to the minutes, that being then from 1 to 10 to 1 to 9 on page 3 of 22 of the packet. So with that revision, I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I move to accept the minutes of the special meeting of June 29th, 2021.
Support? It's been moved by Commissioner Gonzalez, with support by Commissioner Henschel, to approve the minutes of our meeting of June 29th, 2021 as revised. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved.
Okay, just a second, Walters. Okay, got it.
We next need to approve the minutes of our regular meeting of July 6th, 2021. Are there any revisions or corrections that we need to make to those minutes? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of July 6th, 2021.
Support?
All support?
Been moved by Commissioner Gonzalez, with support by Commissioner Syke, to approve the minutes of our meeting of July 6, 2021. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Those minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is time for public comment. If any member of the public would like to present any comment to the Planning Commission with respect to anything that is not on tonight's agenda, we'd be happy to hear from you. Yep, sorry. Yeah, ask you, yep.
My apologies.
No problem.
Take an opportunity to introduce myself formally as your new zoning administrator. Preston Taylor, again, is my name. And I'd like to thank you for welcoming me earlier. It was a pleasure to meet you and ask for your patience as I navigate this new role. But happy to be here.
And welcome aboard.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'll just add that Preston's going to be coming to a number of the planning commission meetings. He's going to be staffing the ZBA, and he's planning to provide some monthly updates on enforcement, so you'll be getting some more regular updates on enforcements along with land use permits.
Thank you. Correspondence, I didn't see any. Next item is no unfinished business, so the next item is the 3 Mile Trail resolution of support. Claire?
Okay, and we have Julie Clark and Elizabeth Calcutt here, and I'm just going to pull up the PowerPoint real quick.
And Claire, could you give, Julie Smith, I got that, right, I think?
Clark.
Julie Clark.
It's Clark.
Uh-huh. And I should know, because I know that we've been introduced, or I've been introduced to you before. And who's with you?
Elizabeth Calvert.
Where did I get Smith?
Clark Smith.
Very English, I think.
I don't know. I apologize. Welcome.
Maybe I want to be a Smith. Thank you for having me here this evening, and Elizabeth Calcutt, who's the project manager on 3 Mile Trail. We've been before you before, kind of introducing the project, so tonight we're really excited to hit a stage of conclusion for the conceptual plan. I also want to thank Claire Carner and Beth. They have been instrumental with their leadership throughout this whole planning process that was launched. The years are now blending after 2020 being the gap, missed year. But we've been working on this for 6-8 months now, something like that. So we're pleased to be here tonight. Just a quick, again, recap, project background. 2006, that first leg of the 3 Mile Trail was built to South Airport Road. It was expected at the time that it would continue all the way to Hammond. 2008 was when they said it would be constructed as part of a road widening project that the Road Commission had. 2008, if we remember what happened then, lots of stuff that didn't help with economic development, and so that plan just kind of died. There was no right-of-way acquisition by the Road Commission, and there was obviously no trail built. So we've been, working with East Bay Township through the years, and frankly, there was no real corridor. So a perfect storm of events happened over the last 3 years, and that was the East-West Corridor Study was completed that really helped inform where major road projects would be happening throughout this area of the county. Second one, the big one, was the Conservancy purchased Mitchell Creek. And the minute that happened, Glenn Chown picked up the phone, called us and said, I think I may have an opportunity for you guys. So that was the second. And then the third was the real swell of community support behind Safe Routes to School. And the township went through and approved a resolution of support, and Norte's work to really energize those schools, all of that culminated in what is a perfect opportunity to be before you tonight. So in 2020, Tart Trails hired a consultant and worked with our partners, East Bay Township, Norte, and Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy. The Land Conservancy always obviously being the big one here with all that land, to launch a conceptual plan. So, and during that time, Safe Routes to School was also happening. So that was a township-led effort that we put through a parallel process. So we were in constant communication there. For the 3 Mile Trail itself, we were looking at a corridor. There wasn't a route, there wasn't a line on a map for a while. First, we looked at a scope, an area. So we were clearly targeting between South Airport Road, where the trail ends today, and all those clusters of schools on the southern end of Hammond Road. We also wanted to look at feeders to the 3 Mile Trail, and this is really to help you guys as you're looking at your long-range master plan, and as you're thinking about future developments, how could they feed into the trail? Because what we want to make sure is there are capillaries there in order to safely get people to the facilities that are being proposed. In addition, again, that Safe Routes to School was a perfect timing to look at where was everybody coming from. And so we were looking at critical connections, we were talking about opportunities. Whenever we put lines on maps, we only put them on public lands or where there's a willing landowner. And in this case, there happened to be two, one being the Conservancy and one being Alta Vista, where they had proposed an easement on the west side of their boundary. We went through a pretty extensive planning process back in the fall in some pretty wicked conditions. A lot of people came out under a tent in the rain during COVID. I think that shows dedication to identify what they wanted to see this trail be. So the consultants put pens down and they listened and they looked for input from the community. And that helped inform a couple of different routes that were analyzed. We also did an online public survey. All of this information is on our website at traversetrails.org through 3 Mile. You can get to it there. I think there's a link through the township as well. So in addition to that general public comment, we also got stakeholders. So those were folks that were really brought some expertise, whether it was the schools, Disability Network, the Track Club, Conservancy Norte, those folks who would either utilize the trail or might help inform what a good design or plan would look like. So we had a series of stakeholder meetings there, again, to help inform what the design might look like and a preferred route. What we heard and what we learned, probably not surprising. People wanted to access the variety of amenities that are within this corridor. That meant the grocery store at Olson's Plaza. That meant the library. That meant here. That meant the schools, clearly, as well as the neighborhoods around it. They wanted to be able to get where they wanted to go without having to get in their car. Of course, they also had the regional trail connection, which the 3 Mile Trail would go to at the Tart. So a lot of interest in safe access. Nobody wants to play Frogger on Hammond, so we heard over and over again, safety is really important. We also heard, which was really interesting, when we ask about points of access, south of Hammond, a lot of people intended to enter the system, get onto 3 Mile Trail south of Hammond. And that was a really good piece of information for us to think about how do we speak to mobility from a non-motorized perspective to get folks onto a corridor and to get them around this region. We really only looked at this sub-region. So we went through, again, with the stakeholder group and with the consultants trying to find some routes. It became pretty clear pretty quick that the preferred route alternative was going to utilize the Land Conservancy's property. And this came through for a number of reasons. Again, the experience that you could have. We looked at all the amenities that people wanted to access. You can't really fit a great trail, that's why it doesn't exist today, on the existing right-of-way of 3 Mile. So we looked at that, analyzed it, and it was not put before you tonight as the preferred alternative. So in order to see if we could really build what we wanted to build, we did a lot of field work out there. So Gosling Zubek was out in the Conservancy's field study, doing all the kind of soils and wetlands and all that stuff. So we could build something. What you see before you tonight is that preferred alternative. So it connects to South Airport Road, right there where the trail ends. We are negotiating with a private landowner who is a willing private landowner and is interested in participating to see if we can make that connection on the northern end, and then it becomes all of Conservancy's land, and then it goes into Alta Vista's easement. So this is conceptual only. There's a fair degree of work that's been done to know, yep, this is pretty much the proximity, but will it be on this side of the water, that side of the water, this side of the tree? None of that. Same with the crossings. What we know about the crossings of Hammond is that it will be safe, comfortable, and inviting. We don't have a specific design on that yet. Through Claire's leadership and Beth's, we are working closely with the Road Commission as they go about redesigning Hammond in between 3 Mile and 4 Mile. So we've been talking to them about what does it mean when you build a new road to make sure kids, and let's focus on kids, can cross this without having a crossing guard there. That's not a viable solution. So that is something that the Road Commission they're with us at the table, they understand, and it will be an expectation when that road is redeveloped that there is a safe crossing. And Claire can correct me if I say anything wrong. So ideally, this is a mix of facilities. There's a lot of boardwalk here. It's a very wet area. So we do foresee quite extensive boardwalk systems. We will anticipate using asphalt or another hard surface. It will be ADA. We will use uplands whenever we can. So it will be a mix of facilities, but geared towards all abilities, all ages. And that's something very important to the Conservancy as well. Same with the environmental conditions. So that's a balance, that's a thread we want to carry through, and a balance we hope to seek. So the next steps that happen, conceptual design was where we are today and where we conclude. So the next steps would be looking for a resolution of support from you, which then goes to the board. So you would be supporting, I think, the resolution that goes to the board. Did I get that right?
Yeah. We're looking for, resolution from, we had got one from Parks Commission last night, looking for resolution from Planning Commission, and then there'd be a separate resolution by the board.
And this is an idea that the next step that we go to is, okay, we have a route. We have an agreed upon route between all the partners. We think it meets East Bay's vision and values. The next step is design engineering. So what does it really cost? Where would it really go? Where are all the permits going to need to be? We have been, working with our folks at Eagle and with MDOT, so we are aware of sort of I'll call them the bumpers that are there in order to get future permits. That design engineering is the next phase. And that's a big one because that gives you that construction document and that gets you set up for future construction. So in this time, what we're trying to do is, okay, first, let's get the route. And that's what's before you tonight, is do we want to work on this? Do we like this route? Then come the next steps. So tonight ends with conceptual design, I think with the assumption that we want to work together to continue to move forward. We are hoping we can pace it with work that the Road Commission is doing. That's part of the other piece of this, which is that mobility plan, so that Claire has ideas on what she can put into a long-term master plan, sidewalks, trails, where do they go? So that way, when you are approached by future developments, you have a footprint that you can work with, that you can talk to developers about what you want to see and how you want this corridor to be utilized. We hope to be in sync with both Safe Routes to School and with Road Commission development so that there's not a giant gap. So we don't have to wait another 10 or 20 years to get this facility done. And the first step was, where do we like the route? And that's where we are tonight. And that's it.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Julie? Mindy?
The pink to be obtained easement on the north side,
Yes,
is that on a private property or is that on a,
private property. And we are working closely with the family right now. They have been interested for a while now in talking to us. And if that purchase were to go through the Conservancy, it would actually go into the Conservancy's property. So it would be owned by the Conservancy. The actual parcel, the 1.25 acres.
Why don't you come up, though, just because of the recording and the...
If we couldn't acquire that, if something were to fall through, just based on where we are in communication with the landowner, there would be an opportunity to go wedge in the right of way and then utilize Conservancy property further south. This is just a
Ideal versus plan.
Planning
being.
There's an alternative. It's not a deal killer to the whole project, although it'd be nice if that worked out.
We're presenting the preferred route. There is Plan B, Plan C, Plan D.
Well, I guess my own personal perspective is that, I think, the organization just does great stuff, and I think it's really, it's a huge asset, I think, to the whole area to have this TART system, but I just kind of like the idea that we're not just following the roadway. Maybe that would have been the easier way in the long run, but I like the fact that, and the Land Conservancy is, on board with you guys, that this trail is going to go through that property, and it's not going to be just a straight line shot, and it's going to wind through some nice property, and I just think that's really cool.
We do too. We're very grateful to the Land Conservancy and their enthusiasm behind it, frankly.
Yeah.
They see it as a benefit to them too, which is really nice.
Yeah, I see that as a benefit to them. I see it as a huge benefit to the citizens of East Bay Township.
The
So,
experience will be.
yeah. So I think what I'm understanding, Claire, is we're looking for a resolution of support, and I think for us to sign that, for myself and for Judy to sign that. So I think the proposed resolution is there. If someone would like to make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2021-03 PC in support of the 3-mile trail extension and preferred alignment.
Support?
Support?
It's been moved by Commissioner Syke with support by Commissioner Nimitz to undertake a resolution of support for the East Bay 3-mile trail extension, that being resolution number 2021-03 PC. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Oh, do you have discussion?
Yes.
Mindy?
Where is number 2?
Whereas number 2 on the map.
No, in the resolution,
Oh, sorry.
the whereas number 2.
Oh, I'm sorry. Not where is number 2.
It says stakeholders through online meetings in the winter and summer. I think it should add spring.
Winter, spring, and summer?
Where are you? Which?
Whereas number 2.
The second whereas.
Oh, the second whereas. Oh, okay, okay.
Fall, okay, fall, engage community, winter. And spring, what was it?
Winter, comma, spring, comma,
Okay,
and summer.
Up to 2021.
Yeah.
My punctuation there, too.
thank you.
Fight in our
Okay.
office.
Yeah, it's a fight everywhere.
Any further discussion or revisions to that resolution? And I think it does, actually. I think we've added that. John, it was your motion. Is that change acceptable to you? And Judy, is that
Yes,
acceptable to you
yes.
too? Okay. So
Okay.
the motion would be as revised, and so we will take a roll call vote. Judy?
Okay. Henschel,
Yes.
Syke,
Yes.
Walters,
Yes.
Tubbs,
Yes.
Gonzalez.
Yes.
Nimitz, yes.
So let me also just say, because it looks like I get to sign this thing, which will probably be my last official act since this is my last meeting, but I can't think of a better way to end than to sign this for you guys. So I appreciate that. So
Happy to make the last meeting a good.
it definitely, you definitely did. So you made my day. So thank you much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is discussion regarding future land use map. Claire?
Just going to grab the computer. 'cause I'm- Okay, so this is the fun stuff, work session. So you'll see, I'm going to actually just pull this up.
Thank you.
Okay, so the future land use map, I know we talked a little bit about the future land use map when we had a joint work session with the Board of Trustees. I think that was back in February. So we talked a little bit about the future land use map. It's a map that shows the general preferred growth and development as well as preservation areas that the township desires over the next 15 to 20 years. So it's not the zoning map. It doesn't reflect the existing regulations. It's not the existing land use map. It doesn't show you what's currently built on the ground. But it's kind of this vision. It's putting a vision for the township onto a piece of paper. So you'll see that we plotted a whole bunch of maps. We've got the future land use map of 2015 up there. And I would encourage you to, I was going to grab markers, but you can, and I can go grab some, but I would encourage everyone to, during our work session, feel free to make marks on there, write comments on that future land use map. Because really the point of the discussion tonight is to discuss whether or not there's certain changes that we want to see to that future land use map. I would say generally the future land use map seems to be working well. I think it's well thought out. It doesn't have a ton of categories. It's got the urban growth boundary well delineated. It's got a lot of natural preservation areas. But I do think there's some opportunities for some slight modifications to it. So in addition to, and we'll work through some of these other maps, but we've got other maps that will help inform your discussion around future land use. So the zoning is really helpful because that's currently what the regulations are that are in place. It's helpful to look at the current zoning when thinking about future land use. It's also helpful to think about the existing land use when you're thinking about future, because, you know, if you've got huge tracts of land that are currently undeveloped, maybe in you know, natural areas that are worth protecting, it's helpful to take a look at those areas as well. In that existing land use, we just put that together. We worked with assessing to take a look at all the parcels. So this is 2021 parcel information of how that land is currently being used and how it's categorized. We've also got some natural features maps, so you'll see there's prime farmland, protected lands, wetlands, and flood risk. So these kind of help to think about, you know, for example, we've got a lot of wetlands in areas within our urban growth boundary, areas that are zoned for low density, even moderate and high density residential. So that's something that we'll want to take a look at and kind of talk through, because there are some environmental constraints in those areas. And I think we saw that when we were looking at the Land Conservancy property that's zoned for residential, but it wasn't really conducive to developing that as a residential development. There's also a prime farmland map, and Paul asked right before the meeting what those different categories meant. So I went and looked at I think it's the USGS survey, and so I've got I could just kind of quickly give you the definition. So prime farmland is farmland of major importance, meeting kind of the nation's definition of providing food for residents. There's also two other categories. One is unique farmland, and then farmland of local importance. So unique farmland is, you know, I would say cherries in Traverse City or wine country in California. It's kind of got these unique microclimates that are identified as having unique farmland, but aren't necessarily providing that subsistence crop that is used, you know, commonly throughout the country. And then areas, farmland of local importance is generally identified by local organizations. For example, maybe the Land Conservancy, like their farmland preservation position would work with farmers and others to identify farmland of local importance. So those are what those categories mean. The area that is potential with, was it farmland with?
If drained.
If drained.
Drained, that's oftentimes those are hydric soils that if they were, you know, drained, then that could be farmed, and that's what you see in a lot of, you know, southeast Michigan. The farmland was drained and used for farming. So those are what those categories mean. I did want to go through, you'll see in the memo that's included in your packet, we've got quite a bit of information and data, and I worked with LIAA, Paul Reese is the GIS analyst there, as well as with our Grand Traverse County Assessing, to really take a look at the existing land and how this land is broken up by category. Because I thought it would be really helpful for the Planning Commission when thinking about reallocating any land. If, you know, is there more, do we need more commercial, or is there a surplus of commercial? Same with industrial. I know that, you know, sometimes, I think in the past, there's been a few developers or applicants that have come forward and looking for industrial, maybe different parcels than what are available, or in different locations than what's available. So we did take a look at, you know, the total land zoned for commercial. You'll see in that memo, we identified the number of parcels and the number of acres that's zoned. You'll see that, and then we looked at for each land use category, commercial, industrial, residential, we also looked at the amount of vacant land that's available. So how much land is currently zoned for commercial that's vacant? So we saw that there was 218 parcels, which is 117 acres. That's about 17% of the total, sorry, 19% of the total commercial land is currently vacant. So I think it's helpful to have some of these statistics. Keep in mind that sometimes location isn't ideal, so developers, even if there is vacant available land, maybe it's not for sale, maybe it's not in an ideal location relative to transportation access or proximity to other services. But I think it's helpful to see kind of where we stand. Industrial, I thought, was an interesting one. There's 513 acres currently zoned for industrial. 260 acres are currently vacant. We've got pretty limited amount of the smaller vacant industrial land. That's about 6.5 acres. And then you'll see some of the larger industrial parcels, 2 to 5 acres is 42 acres available, and over 5 acres, there's almost 500 acres available.
Could I interject just a second with a question? So are there studies, resources to look at a community that would be similar to East Bay Township, sort of somewhat residential, predominantly residential with some business, some industrial, a lot of vacant rural land? Given the population size, what you would expect, what percentage of the township would be commercial, what percentage would be residential? Are there studies that sort of give you, where do you compare to other like communities?
That's a good question. I have seen kind of a breakdown of percentages for commercial versus residential land. I think a lot of communities have more commercial land than they need, kind of a surplus of commercial. But that's something I could definitely take a look at and see if there's some resources.
It just gives you an idea of, what are, do we have a, when you say, gee, should we have more industrial? Well, compared to what? It's hard to say.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is kind of what is the demand and the trends that we're seeing, because a lot of that is unique to this community.
In every,
We're so related to Traverse City and Garfield, we don't exist,
yeah,
separately.
yeah. And it's not to me, it's not a blueprint because we are a unique community, but is it just maybe just another piece of potentially helpful information on what it should look like? The other thing I think about, and I don't know if this is possible or not, but I look at these maps and I go, okay, then I got to go back to the other map, et cetera. Is there a way, and it's sort of like with the overlay district, is there a overlay that you can look at, the current land use map, and then overlay in a clear, the future land use map, and so you can see where it compares and where it doesn't, easily just one on top of the other?
And some inconsistencies.
Yeah, well, just if it's, to me, it's easier to see it if you can just put a plastic piece, you got the existing land use map, and then you put a plastic overlay of the future land use map. You're laughing, is that?
You look like the old textbooks. That's what you're
Yeah,
doing.
like the anatomy. ones.
You're dating yourself.
Yes, that's it, yes.
'Cause I know what you're talking about when you said plastic. That's what I was laughing about.
Yeah, no, I fully acknowledge.
So, yeah, I mean, with the GIS, they can do that. I mean,
I just wonder if it makes it a little easier to,
It has to be a lot of colors, but we can.
yeah, and yeah, exactly. I don't know how because you'd have to have lighter ones and darker ones or whatever, but it just, to me, it makes it easier to say, okay, this has just gotten shifted here a little bit, or that shifted, or this has disappeared, without having to kind of go back and, play the game, what's missing, what's alike in these two pictures, and what's different.
Yeah, maybe if there's a few different layers that we want to focus in on, we can definitely do that.
Just a thought. I don't know how easy that is, or, but,
All you gotta do is print them on
Tracing vellum, we're
The-
tracing paper, right?
the overhead sheets.
Oh, yeah. Does anybody have an overhead?
I still got a box of them at work. We're
oh,
good.
that'd be an overhead projector. I remember that
I
too.
think NMC still has some, or the Smithsonian.
Just take and give you the zoning map and lay it beside your future land use. You can see a lot just by doing that. And it is quite even, It really helps, It looks like we're doing the right thing if you're going by the future land use map.
Anyway, those are, I guess, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but,
No, I think that's a good comment.
One of my questions was, you brought up, is the growth boundary in the right place. It seems like we get a lot of pressure at the very outside edge of the growth boundary, and did we put it out too far? We did this, I don't know how many years ago we did that. And we just took a power line, basically, and we said, that power line runs across the top of the ridge, so anything over the other side, you're gonna have pumping stations. Anything up here, you can go downhill. So that means it would be less expensive for water and sewer. So that's why we picked that. But I just don't know if are we getting the, you know what I mean? There's a lot of area over here between 4 and 5 Mile Road that's vacant, very low density. I just wondered if, do we need to move that line in or something? Move it to Hammond Road or something to try and get the people to, give them the incentive to build it closer in.
Well, I really agree with that, especially since we've had so many people that are trying to develop those big vacant parcels, but they can't because the cost to get water and sewer out there is just astronomical, and they can't, it's not affordable to
And then they
develop.
come to us and they want to do the 1 acre lot ones, which is, I really detest. It's any way to stop that cookie cutter cutting up the countryside,
Are you talking like 4 Mile between Hammond and,
Be north of Hammond,
yeah, between there and 31, or,
between 4 and 5 Mile, there's
yeah.
a lot of property in there.
Oh, yeah, between 4 and 5,
That's-
right,
could
go
be-
that way.
That should be or could be developed, I
Yeah.
guess. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but, because you can see Holiday Hills, how that's all developed out. There's a lot of big pieces around it that aren't developed.
Yeah, and I don't understand, and I've questioned that before, why we went down, especially now with construction, it even brings it to more light. Why are we going down to Willsey Road? I mean, they're not gonna pave, that road is like terrible, and to get it paved, and I don't see the growth boundary going that way, but that's just
And
me.
maybe that's where maybe you just need to
Uh-huh,
carve off some of that. I don't know.
yeah.
So I wonder,
Uh-huh.
a few thoughts on this, and I think this is really good conversation. I think that, so you're not looking for the 1 acre lots, taking 80 acres and 1 acre lots. So I guess there's a few options. One is using the existing growth boundary, putting more targeted, maybe investment into extending water and sewer to those locations to make development more feasible. Or on the opposite side, moving the growth boundary further north and then limiting the development of those parcels and preserving those open spaces so that more of the development is funneled to the northern portions of the township. I do also think that there's some opportunities, even if the growth boundary was kept where it is, to incentivize development just by making some adjustments to future land use and to our zoning plan and ultimately the zoning ordinance to allow for higher density and a more diverse mix of uses and housing in certain areas within that urban growth boundary to kind of funnel development to where there's existing services.
And that's, we've been getting pressure always for the high density. And it's not always maybe where we want it. I think we need to look at that. If there's going to be a certain amount of people who want that high density, let's give them a place to go so that they're not upsetting the neighbors.
Well, I read an article, maybe other people did too, yesterday about housing, and it was about Florida, but it was talking about the fact that to be able to afford a 1-bedroom apartment that was $1,200 a month, they were saying that the minimum wage that the people need to make is $25 an hour to be able to sustain that. And that $1,200 range is what we have.
So now you're back to the affordable housing.
Well, I think
There's
if we have more housing stock, it's going to push the market rate down.
Absolutely, that's right. Right now, it's a seller's market. But there's one thing that they always leave out of that. When I started, I didn't work 40 hours a week and pay my rent. I worked 2 jobs. I worked 60 hours a week. But they want everybody to be able to work 30 hours a week and afford a brand new home. Go to France, that's what they do there. You gotta be realistic too. And then my other concern is, if you build all these apartments, what is the long-term consequence of that? Where does it go down the road? Do these people that are renting now eventually say, I'm not renting anymore, I'm gonna go get a loan and buy a house? And then you got all these apartments, and then there you go, the more apartments there are with no what renters in them, then the rents come down. But what happens when, like, if you look up on the Finger Road, there's beautiful apartment buildings, they're just awesome. But what are they gonna look like in 25 years if the rent goes from $1,200 a month to $800 a month or $600 a month? Because there's a glut of them on the market, or the people that are there buy a house, get past that and go buy a home. And I don't know, I'm not a realtor, I don't know if this happens, but it just seems, being an older person, paying rent was never on the top of my list, I've always wanted to own.
Yeah, the only problem is it's getting harder and harder for people to begin to own. I mean, and this is going to age me too, John. But when I was a kid, most families that lived in my little residential neighborhood of the one-stall detached garage or whatever that owned their homes, there was one wage earner that, one parent stayed home with the kids. And I think that was predominantly up and down my street where I grew up on, because the other wage earner could make enough to make the mortgage payment. So I mean, you talk about having to have two jobs. Well, that was a time where you had two adults in a home, that one person had one job and you could make it work. And you can't do that anymore.
Taxes are too high.
I think we need to look at the surveys and what the stakeholders said they would like the complexion of East Bay Township to look like as well. And then we have to think about what's going to sustain the township. And we know that, I mean, I don't know, I don't do the budget, but with that said, where, what sustainable revenue incomes do we have? Is residential ownership better for us than lots of rentals? Or, I mean, we need to look at what we want it to, or what the people in the survey and the stakeholders said they would like it to look like too, and then what's sustainable.
I would just, and I agree, I think referring back to that community survey is going to be really important throughout the future land use discussion and as we start to talk about the action plan. I think that when you ask about desired housing options for residents, I think it's important to keep in mind that we've got 87% of the existing housing stock in East Bay Township is single-family detached. And so my guess is 90% or more of the respondents live in single-family detached neighborhoods. And so I think that it's, important to think about the frame of reference of, generally you're looking for something similar to what you know and experience. And so I think the fact that there was quite a few respondents that were also receptive to more diverse housing options is indicative of kind of a changing perspective of those types of housing options. And then also just looking at some of the target market analysis that we have that shows that there's 2/3 more rental units that are going to be needed in Grand Traverse County over the next 5 years compared with owner occupied. So we need both, but there is a higher demand based on the research for rental and more diverse housing options.
So there's a lot of pressure from developers to build the rentals because they can keep more profit, supposedly.
There's,
So
I mean,
we need to have a place on our map where we want them. That was my point.
I think you have to start, I mean, it's important to look at the surveys, but you're also looking at a lot of other information, because what you ultimately want to do is kind of figure out what's the vision for East Bay Township? What do you want to be? Because the importance of housing, this is predominantly single-family homes, which is great for a lot of people, but you have to understand that a lot of people have different housing choices depending on where they're at in life. And there is interest now as people are getting older, that they often do look to downsize, and sometimes that might be like in a senior living complex, or it might be actually to an apartment or whatever, but it fluctuates. It's different for different people, and it's at different age and so forth. And in looking at the demographics, also our household sizes are shrinking. Used to be like you did have a family and a group of people, but they're now, household sizes are down to 2 people a household, probably even less in some areas. But in terms of the vision, right now, you can look at East Bay as being primarily a bedroom community of the urban area. I mean, we got, 11,000 people, but we're 87% single-family homes. We got some commercial, some industrial, but it's not, the major centers. So what we're doing is we're relying on the other areas within the urbanized area to provide those additional services, whether it's jobs, shopping, and that type of thing. So I think there will always be that element of East Bay Township as kind of being more of a bedroom community. Some of that is shifting because they're getting the demand. That's the demand that's coming in. And it is something that is valuable for us to consider, the other types of housing, not just for the personal needs of the residents, but also to understand that our employers that are within the township need places for their employees. And people are much more transient these days than ever before. They're changing jobs, they're moving through within the community, but there's also a lot of people, moving into this area. There's people leaving the area as well. But so there's just that constant movement. But I think ultimately it's trying to find out what is the identity of the community as a whole. And I'm thinking, looking at these maps, looking at that survey information, looking at the data and trying to figure out kind of some identity. And that does kind of help steer us in the direction we want to go to. But I think it's important, at least on the housing part, is understand that people are going to have, different needs. The county as a whole is aging. We're a lot older than the rest of the state. We're older than the nation as a whole, and that's going to go for a while here, but then it's going to start to slow down, quite frankly. I mean, as the boomers age out and, at least from what I was looking at it, it seems like we're good for maybe another 20 years or so, 20, 30 years in terms of this kind of growing pattern, at least in this area. But that could also change too, because now you hear things about people moving into the area because of the pandemic. People that want to live in rural areas is a big trend now. They're leaving larger cities like New York and so forth. And they're coming to places like this, places that they vacation. They're like, well, now I want to live there year-round. And it's going to be kind of hard for physically to them to locate here, but also the economy can only absorb so much of those people as well. So they're relying on their jobs to be sourced from other locations. But I think that has a potential to really change this area more so. I mean, the population that's been in here has basically been people moving to the places that they had a vacation home, they retired and they moved up here and they stayed here permanently. That has a potential to slow down, but I think with, they call us a Zoom town, or they talk about climate migration, people moving to areas where we don't have forest fires and hurricanes and earthquakes. This is going to be a desirable area. I think that, and obviously fresh water in the foreseeable future, could place a big demand on this area.
Yeah, I think the population's aging, but I don't see the area's population going down as the population ages, because I think there's going to continue to be an influx into the area.
There was at a time, but I think that's changing. That's going to change now. There was a time when there was some forecasts that the U of M does some long-range population forecasts for the counties in Michigan. And actually, they do a lot of it for the Michigan Department of Transportation, but they go out like 40 years. And they were showing us slowing down, still growing, but slowing. But I don't think that's good. I think that's going to change now. I think there's a lot of other factors.
I think the pandemic skewed it all.
At least,
Skewed the data.
and that doesn't mean it's going to be permanent, but it is for right now what we see.
John, as a planner and in the township or community, how do you balance, the sustainability? Because with different demographics come different needs and different things that we have to fulfill, like there, as we age, maybe more ambulance calls, more that, and then, those types of services, fire, ambulance, the police, how do we balance sustainability when you get, those are things that we have to think about too. And I think you're right, a mixed population is good, but how do you, balance all that urban diversity, sustainability? Do you just let it happen?
No, but I think actually East Bay's in a really good position, because I think what you want to do is, if you're going to provide areas that are going to have higher levels of service, like your water sewer areas, your higher density housing, your shopping areas, whatever, you want those concentrated as much as possible, because there's efficiencies in those all being close together. And that's what we have in kind of the northwest corner of the township. And then you have those rural areas, which, yeah, you allow homes to go into some of those areas, but you also have huge areas that you're trying to preserve and protect. And that's not just why there's a benefit to that, because those are natural areas and we want to preserve those. It's also good that that's a priority, because it's kind of forcing the development that does happen in an area where it's more concentrated, so you get those greater efficiencies, so that, if people want to live out in kind of the rural areas, in the wooded areas or whatever, it's going to be at a much lower density, and they'll be fine in those locations, understanding, that environment. But if there's a demand for higher services, then you're not going to live there. You're going to live into the area where there's the water, sewer lines, the shopping areas, the apartment buildings, that type of thing. So,
But if people are moving out of urban areas right now because of, it's one of those flukes that have happened, do you attract by having that real, do we not want to have a real high density because people are leaving the bigger high densities for more space? Or what does it really look like?
I think the demand for housing has been here for a long time. It's not something that just popped up. I've been a planner in this community for 15 years, and it was even an issue before I got here. So and it maybe have not been as prominent as it is now, but it's always been kind of an issue. So I think it's something we just have to work on. I think if things are pushed more into those areas that we really can accommodate them, that's where we limit it to. And if I like the growth boundary. I think it just, how much strength it really forced to us is just kind of a policy statement that says, look, this is the area that we want. And if it's supported by the community, I think that's great. It's just a matter of us trying to figure out how to manage that area. The demand is probably always going to be there to some degree.
So the issue a little bit I see with that, part of it, market forces drive what's going on, right, a little bit. And then to me, I think about, okay, what does the township do that's either interfering with those market forces, or what could the township do to encourage certain market forces in a certain direction, right? To me, that's, so, as far as the difficulty with housing, is there something that the township in its ordinances has that prevents developers from producing more housing, or in a variety of ways, whatever they see is going to sell, because that's what's going to drive things being done? And do we need to make changes that would make it easier for developers to build the housing stock that we think we need? That's where I kind of look at it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that one area there's a couple areas that I would highlight just in the year and a half or so that I've been here, is along the Hammond corridor. I think that there's market forces or desire from developers to develop at a little bit higher density than what's permitted through zoning, and also what is on the future land use map. We had a detailed discussion on Elmbrook, but then if you also look farther east down Hammond, there's some developers with interest kind of along at the intersection of 4 Mile and Hammond, as well as further east down Hammond, for higher density residential development. There's also been a number of property owners or potential developers that have come to the township with interest in developing at a little bit higher density or a little bit more mix of housing options closer to the US 31 corridor. So I gave the example of like the kind of around Oak Street and,
Pine.
yeah, like Pine and Oak Street, which is just off of 4 Mile. Similarly, in the Pine Grove neighborhood, right now that's zoned low-density residential. There's been some interest from, somebody recently purchased a church that was 5 different historic plats, so 5 small lots from the historic plat in that, and with interest in doing some, mixed housing there. So I think there is some interest in a little bit more infill development in the kind of further north of the township, but zoning is currently limiting some of those options. And those are, proximity to services, those are bikeable, close to downtown, and.
But they're also single-family neighborhoods already.
Right.
Yeah, how much does it change the character of that neighborhood a little bit, right?
Right, and some of these are, along Parsons and along 4 Mile, so not within, kind of at the edge of the neighborhood, so.
Yeah, well, and there are some small apartment buildings like in the Pine Grove
There are some.
neighborhood that sort of fit in. I mean, they don't seem like they're out of place. They're not very big. How many units, maybe there's a couple of buildings with like 4 units in them, or,
Maybe on the edge of it, the outside edge or something like that, but unfortunately, that's not where the church is.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree on the edges. You'd want to preserve the single-family neighborhoods that are there. 'Cause,
Or take them over slow.
yeah, I guess, the other option is to maybe have some conversation with some of the people in that neighborhood too, to get their, feedback, because maybe they would be okay with it, but, I mean, typically, I think if there's a lot of existing single-family homes that create that neighborhood, you kind of tend to want to preserve, at least like the core areas, but like on the fringe where there's a busy road, you could put some,
Parsons area, maybe we could do something.
yeah,
That's the thought.
yeah.
And then the other piece that I was and I'd be interested in your feedback, but related to the urban growth boundary, I look at the lakes area, and future land use identifies the lakes area as eventually developing a maximum of 1 dwelling unit per acre. But there's a lot of large vacant parcels in the lakes area right now. And so, to allow 1 dwelling unit per acre on some of those 40-acre tracts of land, that could substantially change the character of the lakes area and, provide more emphasis or more pressure on services outside of the urban growth boundary for, development, traffic, those types of things. So I think that's another important piece of the conversation is where we want to direct some of the preservation policies. Should it be less than 1 dwelling unit per acre in certain areas? Right now, zoning allows 1 dwelling unit per acre everywhere in East Bay Township, so including agricultural land, natural areas.
What about the Bourbon River is 5?
Is it 5? Yeah, you might be
Bourbon
right.
River is 5.
Yeah, that sounds,
Caught a little flack over that, but I think it was a good thing.
I do too,
And I would be for extending that.
I'm sorry,
Right, I
Ted,
would
could you
agree.
say what about what?
Huh?
You talking about what?
5 acres per dwelling unit instead of 1. That's what we did on the Boardman River
Okay,
stretch over there.
okay.
I think it was 5 acres per because my cousin lives there and he wasn't happy about it.
So the minimum lot size of 5 acres in the
Yeah.
Boardman River
And she was
District.
talking about doing that in the lakes area.
Right.
Which we, because of the no septic, no sewer system out there, I think it's an easily done.
yeah, I think with no water and sewer and the terrain, et cetera, and and stormwater and all that.
Roads.
Roads, oh my gosh,
They don't
yeah,
need- They don't
absolutely.
need a big old, another
Yeah.
big subdivision out there.
I agree.
So, and I guess the clear ways, you sort of like on the bigger parcels, and I'm looking at the future land use map, the low-density residential, and there's, to the west of Arbutus Lake number, I don't know my numbers, I should by now, but,
They're on this map. I've actually seen them now.
oh, the numbers?
The numbers are on there.
But there's that big, there's a fairly good-sized parcel there, so, I mean, is the idea being a little bit that you say, okay, you will allow a greater density, but on a portion of that large parcel? In other words,
Less density.
That's what the ordinance currently allows. You could do cluster development.
Yeah.
And those types of things, but I guess I'm just curious, do you want to allow? Because actually, I just checked the Boardman River District, that also is one dwelling unit per acre.
It is?
It is, I thought we went,
We changed that. It's where we did.
Maximum dwelling units per acre.
Is there an overlay?
huh. I thought,
I'm sure that went through.
Well, we'll double check the records.
Yeah.
So sometimes those get missed. but-
yeah, and I think we can look at it, all we want on a map, but when you go out there and look at the terrain and the wetlands and the preservation of the wetlands in those areas, it's totally different than what's, the wetlands are not mapped on this map. And, we can't, that's hard to do. But I think lower density is important because we need to preserve those,
One of the ways you could do that is buffering requirements for those features. I mean, kind of like what the overlay does, okay, so if you got like a 50-foot setback or 75-foot setback or setbacks from wetlands. And what that does is, it doesn't necessarily manage density directly, but it does kind of do it indirectly, in that it requires some buffering and that could be dependent on water feature types or whatever. So that would impact the developability of any type of a parcel.
And
If
I
it's-
can appreciate that, but you should, there's, keeping track of that and the violations of that and.
Well, it would be if anybody was trying to build a home. I mean, they'd have to get a land use permit for their home and building permit. But, a land use permit would be nobody should be building a home without a land use permit, right?
Or
Yeah.
doing, but, okay. Whatever.
It's the same way you would.
I like the one house per 5 acres.
No, I'm just saying it's
Easier to,
No, I'm just saying it's coming at it from a different angle where as opposed to limiting it by minimum lot size, you're also having a restriction based on buffering. So it's kind of coming at it from a different angle as opposed to say, because a 1 acre lot doesn't necessarily, or let's say it's a 2.5 acre lot or 2 acre lot, doesn't necessarily, it may restrict or reduce density, but the impact could still be negative because there aren't the setbacks from the features that you're trying to protect.
but that would be 5 septics and 5 wells per 5 acres rather than 1 septic and 1 well per 5 acres.
Not if you have a setback that makes it so you can only have one.
Every 5 acres?
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
Oh,
Is that you're
that.
getting there, you're just getting there through.
Different, okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And it's directly related to the feature so that somebody isn't penalized if they're out in the middle of a field, let's say, that doesn't have any
You don't have any wetlands. You don't have-
wetlands or streams or anything like that.
That's only taking into effect the sewer. You still have the traffic and the limited roads out there.
Right.
If you're adding more homes, you're adding more traffic.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is there's no real perfect, minimum lot size only gets you part of it. I'm just saying there's other ways there's not going to be like one way you're going to do it. You're not going to say, well, we're only going to focus on minimum lot size. No, I think you do that, and then I think you also look at buffers and setbacks, and you look at other types of parts of ways that you can
Well,
regular-
but that presupposes what it is that you want to see, right?
Exactly,
So, I mean, depending on what you want to see, then you institute the measures that help you to get there,
yeah,
whether it's lot size or buffering or whatever it might be.
yeah. That's why I think a little bit more on vision would help us too, get to where we're going. 'Cause
So
I
what
think
is the vision? What is the vision? for
That's
it?
what I'm thinking we should focus a little bit on. As we're kind of going through this, I'm thinking, because it's the same thing like with Hammond Road. We heard a lot of comments from people that were really concerned about permitting development along Hammond Road. And one of the things we can do in this plan, and I know it talks about Hammond, but we can actually say, what do we see that looking like in 20 years? What do we see if it was going to be built along there? And, there are comments like, we don't want it like another South Airport. Okay, so what do? You limit the amount of commercial development on there.
Or you limit the curb cuts.
Curb cuts is one, all those different elements, what are the design principles that you would like to see along there?
I mean, I think the biggest complaint about Airport Road is that there's a curb cut every 50 feet.
Yeah, and
You
then to
know?
me, it's also just a bunch of storefronts, strip mall
Right,
storefronts.
well,
Yeah,
then-
it's-
So can you
Yeah.
limit the number of storefronts on a
Service
parcel?
drive, And then you have a green area between Hammond Road and the service drive, so it gives you a little more.
It's
Right.
all those pieces,
Right.
those design principles put together that creates the
Can't take it
vision.
all away from where they won't build there, because I mean.
Well, and to some extent, where do you, if you don't put commercial there, where do you
Right,
want it,
right.
right? You tend to put it where there are the major thoroughfares.
But we don't want it built right up to the edge of the road like they did on Airport Road.
I think that makes
You don't
sense.
want all the signs hanging out up, the
Yep.
somebody's not gonna be
Yep,
But
And, I think taking a look on Hammond at some commercial nodes is appropriate, because there's the East Bay corner, so we currently have a lot of land that's zoned for commercial. So there is potential for quite a bit more commercial along Hammond. Maybe it's looking at kind of where do you want it concentrated, and I know I took notes probably, I think it was at the very beginning of the year, maybe in November of 2020, we talked a little bit about vision, and there was quite a little bit of discussion on Hammond. There's desire for kind of a campus feel, I think Paul alluded to, and other planning commissioners of kind of the nice landscaping, street.
well, and the vision, one of the visions that I've always had that, and it just may be mine, but I look at the property north of Hammond Road, the big vacant parcel. And I've always sort of thought if you had form-based planning, so everything in there's got to conform, but you basically allow everything as long as it conforms to what it should look like. And my thought was it'd be really cool if you had sort of a development where there's residential housing, there's a post office, there's restaurants, and it's all interspersed in sort of a European kind of a look to it. So there's no strip malls. And there are little parks dotted along in that little line, so you could basically live there, walk to the post office, walk to the pharmacy, or ride your bike or whatever, and that you would be could be somewhat contained in there, at least all the services potentially would be available. And I just sort of thought, and you could have, to me, you'd have little, maybe apartments with a courtyard in the middle that you could access from outside, but that'd be a park, and kids could play in that courtyard area and be somewhat secure. But to me anyway, then that's sort of the vision I've always had for that parcel.
And he had,
Pardon?
he had that kind of an idea working, but he just didn't get financing for it. It was gonna be a senior development.
Well, he did, yeah, it was sort of yeah, and it was sort of, along 3 Mile Road, with also he did a planned unit development in there. But it didn't take the whole part, and I don't know how much of that is developable because there's some wetlands in there and all of that stuff, but you've got this huge parcel in the middle of our township, and you could do some really interesting things with that huge parcel.
So what you're saying is you wanna possibly put that on the map differently?
Well, again, I get back, one of the first, I think when I first got on the planning commission, there was a little seminar on form-based planning, and I remember going to that, and I thought, well, that's really a cool idea, and every now and then I bring it up, but it's never been something we've done here. But I think you can be, a developer with form-based planning and can be really creative in what they can
You
do.
overlay district of form-based?
You can, and I think design standards can also get you get you towards form-based, so maybe a full form-based code is very complicated, and a lot of times they're in, historic business districts or downtowns to try to preserve that existing character. They deal with, windows and the percent of, just very, somewhat burdensome at times for developers, but I think you can get get a lot of what you're looking for in a form-based code through some design standards for setbacks.
Well, and I sort of see buildings, maybe buildings right up to the street,
Yeah.
you know?
Parking, location of parking, landscaping standards,
So when you-
lighting.
So when you put that vision together, then that's where I think, at least at this point, I don't think we want to get into form-based codes or anything like that. But what you want to do is to say that you would be supportive of those, and that's where the plan can, if you want to, got that vision, now translate that into the plan. The plan is the policy that's going to support your development decisions, your zoning decisions. So we could have elements within the plan that talks about this area between 3 Mile and Town Line, between South Airport and Hammond, that talks about mixed use, that talks about walkability, that talks about, all the parks, all those elements that create that vision, and at least would say that would be supportive of it. And maybe the process that most likely we'd use is something like more of like a plan unit development, which could include form-based codes within it. So a developer could go in there and then create a specialized form-based code strictly for that development. But you're able to do that in the plan based on the vision. You just got to pick apart what are the elements of that vision that make it a reality and kind of incorporate that into the policy of the master plan.
Well, and again, it's my last meeting, I'm just throwing it out there and letting you guys.
Right, but I'm just saying,
You
using that
guys-
as an
you guys
example.
run with it.
Yeah, but I'm just using that as examples, like
Uh-huh.
it's the same thing, like if we want Hammond to be something, I mean, we know what we don't want it to be,
Yeah,
so we should be very clear in that.
yeah.
We do, and there's nothing wrong to say in the master plan what you don't want it to, but it helps to counter, it's better for developers. They want to know, they want an
You know what you
even
don't want,
playing.
what is it that you do want?
Yeah, they want an even playing field. They want to know what are the rules, they're going to follow, so what you have to do is create that vision, say, our expectation as a community is this, and these are the elements that we want. And then, that way, if they come into town and they're looking at it and they propose something, and if they're smart, they'll read your master plan and they'll say, okay, we can match what you guys have envisioned for this corridor or this location. But I think we put out there what our vision is, and granted, the market, we can't control that, that's going to happen the way it is, but we can certainly place our vision out there to say our expectations of this, and it requires them to, at least to conform to some of that, or some of those concepts there, because they know that's going to be what's going to be receptive and approved in the community. So it's hard when we don't, we can look at the future land use map and see the designations on here, but it's hard to, when somebody comes in, everybody in the room, when they look at a development proposal, they all have different visions in their head of, oh my God, this is going to be the worst thing ever, or some people are like, well, this is pretty cool. Everything's different, and the more we articulate what that is, it benefits the community, it benefits the developers, it benefits the process that we're going through. It's like, yeah, remember when we did the master plan and this was the vision we had for this area? It's easier to
Do you
develop.
think with photos would be good?
I think photos are important, and they don't have to be from this community. And examples of elements, walkability, showing sidewalks, parks, or mixed use where you might have, let's say, commercial on the first floor and residential on the second floor, whatever that might be.
Creating a buffer, if you're talking about Hammond Road, just creating a buffer, and I mentioned this before, but I'll say it again, when I'd never been to Hilton Head, I went down there and I was amazed to see, as you drove along the main strip, they had all commercial items, but there was this buffer of trees and everything. You gave you a very open feeling, but you could still see, what you needed to go to. you know, I was listening to some of the things, and one of the points that we have in development is, you know, number one, as far as developing, as they have the famous, you know, workforce housing, it seems that it's good to have workforce housing, but you don't necessarily have to have it on the bay. You know, you know, a little further in. And the other thing is that in any support, as we talk about water and sewer and things like that, it's what is the public transportation system? You know, is that going to be big enough and buffered enough to be able to handle that, so you don't have all these cars on the road, that there's a reliable public transportation system? We're always going to run into the fact that when we decide something, is always going to be for those people that are there. It's always, you know, I'm for workforce housing, I'm for multifamily housing, but not in my backyard. You know, over there is fine, but not here. We mentioned about developing more apartments and forcing, well, not forcing, but market forces would bring the rents down. Well, when the rents come down, then the interest of the owners come down too. And, you know, they don't keep up the properties as we would like to see that done. We have the other issue that we are competing against is the whole issue around the short-term rental issue. Recently in my area, 2 homes went up for sale that were substantial in value, and the day of the closing is the day after my neighbor got a letter saying that that house was going to be a short-term rental. You know, that's another issue that we have to contend with. I think the development of this area is going to be primarily retirement. I think a lot of people are going to be, who are retiring, are coming up here. I think the idea of remote working is fine right now, but I think there's going to be recession to the mean, and that remote will be around, but not as much as we think it's going to be. So these are just some thoughts as I was, you know, listening and writing them down. The one thing that I am big on, and that is trying to preserve as much as possible, in fact, not even much, preserve the wetlands and some of the resources that we have here that actually attract people to this area. I think that there are some tracts of land that probably need to be developed, but it has to be done thoughtfully. I don't know about the growth boundary. I think it's probably okay the way it is right now. But that's something that can be discussed. And these are just some thoughts I'm throwing out. But this has some implications, but I agree basically with what John says. And that is, we have to have our vision for what we want to be. And once we have that idea about what we want to be, a lot of that follows. So, just some thoughts.
Claire, do you think it would be, I mean, you're talking about the growth boundary, and I don't feel like I have the expertise as, gee, is it the right size? Should it be bigger? Should it be smaller? I mean, would it be helpful to have a couple of developers that come in to talk about their perception of the growth boundary and what it means to them? And, or, you know, not just developers, but others, citizens with other areas of expertise as to why that may be important or not important? I mean, would that help the planning commission to determine whether or not it should be shifted, increased, decreased?
Yeah, I think I think getting those perspectives would certainly be helpful. I think also some, in the planning commission many of you might already be aware, but really understanding what the policy implications are of the location of the growth boundary. So we have ordinance number 109 that has some specific requirements for new development, that they must connect to public water or sewer, or put in public water and sewer within a certain distance, within a certain number of, you know, new land divisions or dwelling units. So there are definitely some policy implications of that location of the urban growth boundary. If you're in it, you're subject to that. If you're outside of it, then you can do, private well and septic. But then there's a lot of policy implications beyond the urban growth boundary that would have ramifications. And that's density and types of housing that's permitted, zoning. So I think that the urban growth boundary is important, but it's not kind of it's not a factor that dictates everything. I think the location of water and sewer and availability of water and sewer really drives development. I think our water and sewer rates really drive development, and the township board is looking closely at that and thinking about making some adjustments.
Well, and is speeding up development, making it easier to develop, is that necessarily a good thing?
Not if it's not going where we want it to go.
Yeah, or in the way that we want it to go, or the community wants it to go.
I think one thing that's kind of important, and I need to do a better job of this, is really get in my car and drive around and look at the infrastructure. I'm familiar quite a bit with the south, and know a lot of those roads are gravel and pretty bad, and we talk about Vanderlip all the time. So I think getting out and kind of driving too, so that we really can, visualize it and see if it is really correct. And then secondly, kind of going back to the stakeholder meetings and things like that, I think people would like, maybe, like Paul talked about, a campus feel or a European feel, a destination, not just a drive-through. Because right now, we're kind of wing into Roy's, buy this part for your hardware, or get gas, or your boat, or whatever, or stop at Olson's and pick up what you need real quickly, boom, it's a drive-through, if you look at the websites, it says you spend 15 minutes in Roy's, you spend 15 minutes in Olson's. They would like a destination where the farmer's market, or, people can go and take their kids and have an open space and have coffee, or a restaurant, or walk around. Not just, like, someplace to go.
And that really doesn't work well on Hammond and 3 Mile Road. It's gonna have to be off Hammond and 3 Mile, like this property we were talking about. If you could get him to develop something there, it could be a little community, that, like you were talking about. That's a great idea,
Would the planning commission agree that the 3 Mile in Hammond is not really conducive to the walkable mixed use? Because that's sort of what's been in the master plan for the last, 20 years or so, is that East Bay Corners that's really centered at that intersection.
Never agreed with it.
I actually think it is, but not at that scale. I think it is like a suburban town center. And so I don't see it as, it's not going to be like a, Sutton's Bay type of feel, or something like downtown Traverse City. It's not going to be that, but I do think the convenience of, quite frankly, that 3 Mile in Hammond, the commercial businesses that are right here really serve a lot of people throughout the whole township. And I think that access is exactly why people enjoy it. Because they don't want to go down South Airport or go over to 31, but they want to go to Roy's, or they'll go to Olson's or whatever, or pick up a pizza or whatever. I think the access of it is really valuable to living in this area. Those provide some really important services for people in this kind of broader area. I think as a center point, I think it actually works really well. But it's not going to be, it'll be walkable more like what Tart was proposing, trails and stuff like that. And maybe there is some gathering spot or like destination point that people are looking for, but it's going to have more of a suburban feel to it than more of like a small town, town. It's not going to be a formal town square, but maybe there is a place where there could be like a little amphitheater, where maybe there could be some entertainment, in the summer months and stuff like that, where people could gather and have a farm market or whatever. But I think how that looks and functions is not going to be like something in a formal village setting.
Where do most of the people that use the commercial area, the Roys and where do you draw most of these folks from?
We draw mostly from the south, out to Kingsley, out to Fife Lake, everything in between. We've done some pretty extensive studies on that in the past. And, all the lakes areas, all the way up, up to Timber Ridge.
Are these people coming in from that area and passing through and stopping on the way into
Coming
town?
Back and forth from their jobs.
How many are coming from the west?
There, that way, not a lot. We don't, especially since, they developed Garfield, the corner up there, like Edgecombs. They used to come to the store every night. They'd get there at 5 minutes to 11. And, but now he goes up to Shell because it's closer. Get his tobacco or whatever he gets, But yeah, we never draw it a lot from that way as a general rule. I mean, we do have some specialty items that draws from all over the place, but as a general rule, most of our customers are around the lakes, Holiday Hills, and I'm really hurting because of a stupid roundabout that's getting built.
Oh,
No, and I think too that, you're offering hunting, fishing, that really draws too, and a lot of the people who are, if something breaks, where it's
Right.
convenient for,
But
It's wonderful.
most of our sales are in the convenience
Yeah.
category, the
Yeah.
gas and the beer and the soda and the few groceries and so forth. So that's our biggest percentage of our sales, and that's all these people out here that stop at Roy's because they don't want to wait in line at, walk half a mile at Olson's, they park right at the front. And that's, but I'm pretty sure Olson's will tell you the same thing. That's who he's servicing. So I still say I like the idea of, it's basically Klaus's property, or that, if we could do something with that would allow him or encourage him to develop it so he can make money, because that's what he wants to do, but still fit like what he was talking about. It would bring people to the.
yeah, and the thing is, and be careful here, I think it's got to be the right, I mean, it's a great parcel of property, I think. Again, not knowing the wetlands issue, and so maybe not completely, but it's just, you got this huge parcel right in the middle here, and, but I think it takes the right person with the right,
And he wants to develop it. He's tried to develop it, so that means he'll try again, and so we should be prepared for once.
Yeah, so, and I think that the master plan, getting back to what John was saying, can really solidify that vision with
Right.
some images, some descriptive text about what we're looking for. I see, some of the mixed use and public gathering spaces, maybe away from the roads, having the safe
And maybe
crossings at the intersections, but having some of
yeah,
the
yeah, and the hard part,
quasi-public
well, and the
spaces
hard part for me in thinking about that vision is like, I sort of think, little windy streets in there with maybe a little neighborhood restaurant, with little awnings or whatever. But yet, it's got to be, if it's so remote that people can't find it, are they going to be able to be successful in that location?
Well,
That's the issue a little
That's
bit.
why we give him the higher density, so he can build.
That a lot of the clientele comes from people living around it. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I mean, we could really, details, you can't get in, and that used to be hard to find. It's not anymore, and I think there could be support for businesses.
And then it'll be important just to look at, are there any barriers from a zoning perspective, from density use? PUD would be certainly an option, but generally PUD should be consistent with the underlying zoning. So we want to see, dwelling units per acre, is that consistent with what?
Well, the other thing too is that that's the industrial zone property, and if you're taking all that away, do we need to put industrial somewhere else?
I think you could maybe do both, quite honestly.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, why couldn't he, if he can do anything? That
So
way
you're-
people's jobs could be close to their homes.
well,
maybe.
that development that they wanted to do at Alta Vista, remember, they wanted to have the business, the industrial in the middle of it, and they wanted to put make it a little community that
Right.
the workers worked in
Yeah,
the,
right.
Is a portion of that zoned East Bay Corners though, and then it's also industrial? I guess I'm not super
It
familiar
depends on
with
where
the
you're going.
parcel.
Yeah, 3 Mile Road, if you went, right, you would probably go where the creek is there, I would think.
Okay.
So you would go commercial on,
No, we're going to rezone
Between Town
Roy's.
Line and 3 Mile.
okay?
He
In
didn't-
Ted's
I'm
house.
sorry, he didn't hear you.
Yeah, my house. And the airport, with the exception of, well.
Oh, that little,
The
that little,
little purple spot.
I see.
Generally this area.
Okay, that area.
Where?
Yeah, that seems to be, that would become,
All the way down though, right?
Down here?
Yeah, all the way down, all the way to the airport.
Okay. Well, not all the way, but yeah.
Yeah,
here.
just about all the way to whatever the development is down there.
so what are you thinking that would become? I'm sorry.
You're right in the wetland.
More?
Could be high density,
Uh-huh.
mixed use, like he was talking.
Yeah,
form
my
based.
thing's like form-based. It's got to have a certain look to it.
And the Mitchell Creek overlay borders it, but that would be, opportunities for those 100-foot setbacks. And
Yep, he'd have to deal with that anyway, either which way.
it doesn't really go through that parcel. It still has quite a bit of space for.
In your industrial, I found is that a lot of people are looking for smaller lots. They want something like 2 to 3 acres to put their business on. I think we're going to start getting to a point where any of the existing industrial parks are going to be filled out here in the next few years. But what the people that are often going in those industrial areas, I mean, there are the larger buildings that need space, but most likely in this area, they're looking for like 2 to 3 acres, maybe up to 4 or 5 acres where they can put their building. They want something that they can access, ideally have water and sewer available to it. They're not gonna, it's hard for them to go into large pieces of land, because a lot of these industrial type of businesses don't really need that. They're just looking for something more that fits their size and their needs. So I think that's something that would have to be kind of considered that as part of that, how much industrial is needed. It's more importantly to think of, is it readily available for something like maybe another industrial park or something like that, or second phase.
Definitely with that analysis that we got,
Right.
there is limited, smaller industrial
Yeah,
parcels.
that's what they're looking for.
Not any less than 2, and there's 14 from 2 to 5. So I think a lot of the 2 to 5 are in, and I don't know the details of this, but
What
my
if we-
understanding is there's limited water availability.
What if
in
we expanded it on 3
portions
Mile
of
Road?
What?
The industrial expanded on 3 Mile Road across from the industrial park that's down there already. There's a couple big parcels there. I think they border the school. Maybe you could put more industrial right there.
Doesn't the school own those?
Yeah.
What
Do they-
school?
Oh, they own all the way up to
Academy.
the road?
I think so.
Oh, they-
They own what that used to be the house right there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, maybe that wouldn't work then. The kids could learn a job. Yeah, I don't know where else you'd put industrial if you're gonna keep it, unless you're gonna really take it outside of where it's at now.
Has there been any inquiries at 3 Mile and South Airport for anything? For commercial development or anything like that?
There has, I think that there's some environmental constraints on those
Okay,
sites.
just because
that
of
have
the
made,
creek?
It's mostly been inquiries from realtors trying to sell
Okay.
properties. And
So I was thinking of that corner area, and I know it's really hard to establish new commercial areas. And I was thinking, that would be a difficult area for commercial, quite frankly. There's a lot of traffic pours through that South Airport and 3 Mile intersection. And what I know it's noted here as neighborhood commercial, I don't know if that's really a good spot.
Didn't you do that for the owners, though?
Yeah, I mean, you could probably leave it there, I don't know, but it's,
Yeah, it seems like we did.
They asked for that.
yeah. it's heavy, thick traffic flowing through there on a regular basis. And at some point, I don't know what's going to happen with South Airport Road, but, if it's going to be,
It's supposed to go all the way across
All the way across.
to 4 Mile Road.
well, I was just thinking like it's just 2 lanes.
Oh, yeah, well, that doesn't stop them.
I don't know if there's any ability to widen that road.
What the hell?
It looks, they go right through that development.
It's almost connected.
I know, but they made us erase the line.
Yes, they did, didn't they?
I thought it made sense to me. But all the people that live on 4 Mile Road didn't think so.
Well, even if you connected it right here, and only a few people knew about it,
No.
Oh, how long you keep that secret? Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I like that idea.
I mean, we've sort of having a general, what I would, rambling conversation, which I think has been really helpful. I don't know, are there any specific questions, issues that you'd like us to address
No, I
right
think-
now that?
I think this has been really helpful. I think the last question I would leave you with are, and feel free to go kind of circle areas on that future land use map, but are there changes based on this conversation that you think should be looked at closer for future land use? I think we're going to have more opportunity to talk about vision when we start to go through the action plan. So I have pretty detailed notes from our last visioning session, detailed notes from our joint session with the township board. So I'm planning, and I would be curious to hear what your preference is from me. I would be happy to come to you with some vision language based on what we have in the current master plan, what I've been hearing, and have you edit it and wordsmith it, as well as come to you with some recommended goals and policies and actions based on the public input we've heard, based on our sessions that we've had, based on the existing master plan, and kind of work from there? Or would you like to develop that action plan from the ground up through work session?
I have a question about the industrial area that's north, that butts way down 3 Mile. Is that park, I think it's called Peninsula,
Peninsula
whatever.
Business Park,
Yeah,
yeah.
Peninsula. Is that all full?
No,
Oh,
no.
Okay, so we could develop in there.
I think that that's an area where there's some.
You're talking about here?
Yeah,
Right
yeah,
here?
yeah.
That's a lot of land in there.
Is there a lot of land in
Yep.
there?
I think there's water limitations on water.
Yeah, it's pretty low.
I think, Claire, in addressing that question, that sometimes I think it's easier to focus, have one person kind of focus things down, and then let it be critiqued. It's like, yes, I agree with this, or no, I don't, as opposed to having 7 people trying to focus in and put something together. I think that'd be my,
I think that would probably work smoother. I just didn't want to overstep my.
yeah.
Did we designate, and I apologize for this if I missed it on the other maps, do we designate where our parklands are?
I think on one of those it
There
I
does.
is one.
missed it then, I'm sorry.
Take a look at the protected land.
Okay,
Right here.
Yeah,
okay. All right,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So that's actually a new map that I was
Yeah.
probably yet to develop. So we got shape files from the Conservancy, so we've got all of the lands that are protected in perpetuity through conservation easements, but are actually not accessible to the public. We've also got all the common areas with the, condo subdivisions and stuff. So on that map is all of the lands that are protected in perpetuity. Some of them are accessible.
Just as a question, up on 31, is that the hotels that are there? All that,
Yeah, those got a little bit messy because they're condos, so they're technically common areas.
Oh.
That should
oh, private common areas. Is that the,
common areas.
we're
with
private.
condos.
Now, I do want to,
Parking lots are protected in perpetuity.
but state and federal lands, people, they can sell off whenever they want to.
Right.
Right, because,
Same with, same
Yeah.
with, yeah.
because I know, so that's an interesting concept.
you want to buy it?
No, but I just know they're thinking about selling lands,
The state.
the state or the feds.
They're always doing that.
I know.
So
So I-
you're right, that's a moving target. So that's protected
Right.
lands as of today, but it could
Right.
change
So
tomorrow.
I-
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just
Yeah.
want to bring that to our attention, just in case.
Are we ever notified of those? We are, aren't they?
I think that the township does get oftentimes first right of refusal or sometimes.
Or at least we're notified. We might not, I don't know if we're always, if we get an opportunity, because they're always swapping land and
Right, that's
changing.
when they swap, you don't get notified.
Okay,
Right.
It's like Hobbs Highway, that little subdivision in there, 40 acres, whatever, he traded for a lot on Silver Lake to expand the parking lot.
Yeah, when they swap, we don't get
We don't
notified.
have a
Okay.
choice.
Right.
And then my question is, are we prepared when this happens, which is gonna happen, to develop it the way we want it to? Is that area, are we glossing over that because we don't
I mean,
think
it
it can
should-
ever be developed, or
We
should
should
we?
be very thoughtful in the way it's zoned.
Yeah, so we
if
should
it is
look at
sold
that.
off,
there should be a provision if, there's kind of like underlying zoning of some sort or something, like if it does go into private hands, what is the default zoning for that area?
Uh-huh.
And is it
Uh-huh.
appropriate?
Most of this is zoned natural area.
Yeah. But yeah, that is a moving target,
I know.
but it still creates, for the most part,
Is
it's,
that little subdivision Hobbs, is that on our, is that in East Bay?
Which one?
Which map are you looking at?
I'm trying to find it, Fly Road,
Okay.
Yeah, which one are you looking at?
where it says Healy or something like that?
Which one are you looking
Oh, I'm
at?
sorry, I'm looking at the future land use.
Okay.
Yeah, that is in East Bay. And that turned out into a 1 acre lot subdivision.
Are you-
So is that,
Is that,
but that is in our yellow area there, or? Yeah, that is in our.
oh,
density,
Healy, okay.
Which low density allows 1 acre, 1 unit per acre, right?
Go look at that.
In areas without sewer and water. 3 were areas with sewer.
Okay, so that's kind of down by,
See, it's
yeah.
right
I see
between
that.
Supply and Hobbs, that little triangle there.
Right, I'm trying,
I think some of the road across the street, I think the guy swapped 40 acres there with the DNR
okay.
in the state of Michigan for that.
No.
And I also think, isn't there might be power lines too, that, there's power easement back in there.
Oh, there's one, you can see it, it goes right along.
Yeah.
But I'm just concerned with, the rest of that green area,
Me too.
is this something that we want to do the 3 acres per unit, in this green area here? It's what we call the natural area.
I think that's something we need to seriously look at.
Yeah, it'd be easy to do if it's mostly state land, because they're not going to complain. And then it would stop.
Good point.
problems When they start selling off.
I think that would make sense to
Yeah.
kind of be proactive and
Yeah.
assume it's going to sell, and so what is it that you want it to look like if it does?
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
Are there any planned water and sewer developments or constructions in the future, do you know? There is.
Yeah, I mean, most of the recent developments that we've approved have extension of water and sewer.
Right. But,
There's not a township-led one at this time, is that what you're asking?
I'm sorry?
There's not a township-led one at this time, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
There's not a township one led at this time, but that's why you do have these maps here. And that is when, so that we asked our engineer to map it out, what it's gonna be, so that if we have a developer that comes in, we at least know what the minimum needs to be to put it into that area. And that's what you're seeing on these 2 maps. And that was just done,
I think a year and a half.
it says 19, but I feel like it was later than that. It feels like it was yesterday. So, it was very recent. I thought, Are these final? Because I thought
That's the
Damien,
master utility plan that was adopted.
okay, I thought Damien had changes to make in it.
He might have, but that was what's online, is the master utility plan.
Okay.
that was adopted.
Next time, tell them we don't need to know how many feet deep it is.
No, it's
Why is
the,
it red?
it's the diameter of the line,
Oh, that's a diamond.
yeah.
So, and just for understanding this, so I'm looking at the sanitary sewer map, and I'm looking at George Street, by the airport. And so you can see the green line that goes along South Airport, and then there's a little spur that goes into that subdivision. I presume the line runs to all of those houses that are in that subdivision? No?
I wouldn't think so. It would show on there if it was.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, so that's why I'm questioning. So everybody, so that spur runs in there, but everybody in there is basically on septic?
Down George Street.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, and they've even talked to recently to find out if, that area, because there's been a lot of failures lately with the high water, there's been a lot of failures of septic systems lately, and so the township went to that subdivision and said, hey, are you guys interested? And there was an overwhelming not interested.
Yeah, so basically, in Holiday Hills area, all of those homes
So would
had the sewer.
the township ever put that in and then make them hook up as they go?
They could, but we've been, talking to the residents, and the residents have said no.
Well,
So-
yeah, because they don't want to pay for it up
Right.
now, but if they have to pay.
So like
Whenever they
when
fail.
they went through and did the water through English Woods, the whole reason was to loop the system. So that was a township-led effort, but it was to loop the system. And to put that in there is not a township, not a necessary function of the system. It would, so it would,
That's what they
it would
said,
need,
Flint.
so that would need to be more of the resident-driven.
It looks like that neighborhood
See,
does
that's-
have water, so
Yeah.
there's not a lot of incentive for them to get the sewer if you got water. So my septic system's not working really good, so what? I still got clean water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's strange, they would put water in there and not,
They didn't put sewer in when they did English Woods, they just did water.
no, George Street, he said.
Well,
Yeah.
right, but the one that we just did, it was just water, there's no sewer, they didn't put sewer in at the same time.
Gotcha.
So the other comment, you were asking if we wanted to feel free to draw on there. The only thing, and I'm guessing probably when the meeting is concluded, if anyone wishes to do that. My only concern is that if there are four of us that go over there and have a discussion, we're still having a meeting, right? So I think that'd be the only thing, is just to limit how many are over there at a time, so we don't have a quorum as you're looking at that map and making your comments.
You want to mark up the copy that you have in your packet, take a photo, text it to me, email it to me, either one is fine.
We
If you
can
want to
leave
think
it.
about it and
But you've been
follow up
taking
later.
notes, so you know what we've been talking about, right?
I've taken very copious notes.
I don't,
Better than mine, probably. I'm not going to be that detailed if that's okay.
Fine, I just action item.
Okay, that's good.
Okay. Anything else, Claire, you wanted to cover through this right
I
now?
don't think so. This was, hopefully you guys found this.
Interesting discussion.
And it's interesting, it's, pretty big. It's a lot different than what we've been doing, which is getting into the minutia with the development reviews. I think it's nice to take a step back.
And sort of look at the forest a little bit.
There
Yeah,
was a
John?
Comment, talked about areas of further discussion about the regional business district, and mentioned, would multifamily be appropriate in certain areas within the RB district? So, I know some communities that have like a commercial housing development provision. It actually could probably work well in that area because you do already have a lot of hotels. So if somebody wanted to, I mean, and actually, some of the hotels function as multifamily on a seasonal basis. You know, they'll rent out their rooms from like November to May or something like that. So that already kind of is occurring there. I think the key would be just to make sure that those types of uses would meld well with what's in there, but I think it potentially could.
And there has been some interest from developers in multifamily. It's a special land use permit, which I thought was interesting because it is higher intensity, consistent with some of the other uses along regional business district. And those lots are so deep that there's a lot of pieces of those lots that aren't being used. So I was thinking that there is a lot of opportunity for, you know, higher intensity or higher density kind of at the back end of those commercial lots.
And that would work out well, because I think one of the things, if you do allow for like a multifamily building in a commercial district, you want to have it somewhat buffered or designed in a way so it's not like you're just in a hotel parking lot. It's a little bit, I mean, I think people will tolerate certain environments on a short-term basis, but for long-term housing type of thing, you want to make sure there's some green space, that type of thing. But I think with those hotels, the way they are, we could probably, I mean, I think they're already attuned to that to some extent as being kind of resort-minded. So,
Place to put up the health.
right.
So can we just recap real quick so I'm understanding? We might be looking at the industrial and either making those go like smaller to 2 to 3 acres, is that what we're looking at? And then seeing if we want to move some of that a little bit? Yeah, the one along Hammond and Town Line.
Taking a look at maybe that area.
Right. Right, and then also look at the growth boundary to see if that's where we're all thinking it's good, right? Is that the other thing? And then maybe looking at the lakes area to see if we want to increase or do some mitigating situations.
2
to-
acres per unit or 3.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think the natural area we identified as maybe more acres per unit. And then I think John was talking a little bit with the lakes area. We do have, in the Portland River, we do have deep setbacks from the river.
Yes.
100 to 150 feet. We don't have setbacks for wetlands, and so there, you know, there's other opportunities for setbacks from natural features that we can look at in the ordinance.
Do we feel that the ag area is, I mean, I like it. I've been, of course, driving that quite a bit lately since Hammond is cut down, so it's really, and
Yeah, I think what I got is that if you think that it should change, that Claire is saying, hey, on your own copy of the future land use map or on the copy on the easel, go ahead and make the change rather than us sitting together and deciding it, so to speak.
I just wanted to recap kind of so that I'm clear on where we're moving.
And I might come to you at the next meeting with some minor proposed adjustments for them.
Okay.
Based on our conversation and follow-up emails.
And that would be the August 24th meeting that you would have some of that? Okay. Our next
Yeah.
master plan meeting?
Yeah, I'm thinking the August 24th will be focused on action plans. We'll kind of go through vision, setting up goals, but we'll also revisit this future land use discussion, small adjustments. And Ted and Rob are welcome to sit in the audience and provide public comment.
It's not what I would have done.
Well, what is local public institution? Is that like a school or like on protected lands?
There's
Local-
churches,
Oh.
those are, so we're trying to kind of identify areas that are
Yeah, the big area is the Brown Bridge
Yeah, Brown.
area that's,
I was kind of wondering what some of those other like along Hammond, there's some in 3 Mile, and
Those are the schools.
those are, that's what I was thinking.
Schools, yeah.
Schools and the library
Yeah.
and this building.
Right.
yeah.
Campground, like there, that must be the state campground on Arbutus 3 and 4.
They're kind of the ones that didn't fit into our broad.
Yeah, okay, got it, got it. Well, there's a lot of little things. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm amazed at the state and federal, there's quite a bit of land there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is public comment, and I think our only member of the public left, so I presume, but I will open up for public comment if anybody would like to make comment on anything that was on tonight's agenda. Seeing none, then I would simply note that we have a meeting on August 10th, which is our regular Planning Commission meeting. That will be at 6:30, and then August 24th is a master plan special meeting focus group, results presentation and action plan. And with that, before I adjourn, I just wanted to take a moment just to say thanks to, over the past 15 years, everyone with whom I served on this Planning Commission, including those of you who are currently serving with me, that being Paul Gonzalez and Ted Henschel, Judy Nimitz, Mindy Walters, Dan Leonard, and John Syke. Also in the past, having served with Matt Cook, Louis Grollo, Rob Larea, Tracy Bartlett, Jim McDowell, Ralph Bergsma, who I think initially talked to me about whether I'd be interested in being on the Planning Commission, Holly Hawkins, Beth Friend, Mike Nichols, and Kevin Endress. And also then just to thank Jay Kilpatrick and Rick Brown and Claire Carter, who were the planners for the township during the time that I was on this Planning Commission. So I just thank all of you, and it's been a pleasure to serve for the residents of East Bay Township. So I appreciate that. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank
Will
you.
be missed.
Thank you.
So will Ted.
Yeah, you guys will be missed
Tuesday
immensely.
night.